Well, hey, how's it going, Cap City family and friends? If you don't know me, my name is Scott McIntosh. I'm the youth ministry leader at Capital City Baptist Church. Since before the new year, we have been taking a deep dive lately on what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. Lately, we have been taking a slow crawl through the Sermon on the Mount, in which Jesus lays out a blueprint on how to be both a disciple of His and a disciple, how and a citizen of God's kingdom. Well, today we're going to be in Matthew 5, 21 through 26. I want to encourage you to go ahead and pause the video and flip open to that passage. Or if you prefer, you can also click the link in the description and it will take you to the passage on Bible Gateway. So I'm trusting that you have resumed the video. You're at the passage, and let's go ahead and dive in. Matthew 5:21 through 26. You have heard it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder. Anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Raka, is answerable to the court, and anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift in front of the altar, and first go and be reconciled to them, then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. This passage marks the beginning of a series of you have heard, but I say statements. What Jesus is doing is he's not attacking the law, but the way that the law has been interpreted, taught, practiced, and believed within the community of God's people. Essentially, there was a lot of tradition and human reasoning that had been built up around God's law. In the laws of the Old Testament. And a lot of these extra laws had been added to it. And we as Christians, we do the same thing. Some of you might remember a time when dancing or playing cards of any kind was considered to be very sinful. And you could be called onto the carpet for playing Go Fish. So here Jesus is tackling errors in understanding of God's law. And he starts this you have heard, but I say statements by going after a big one, murder. Jesus gets to the heart of the issue literally. The issue is not in the physical external manifestation of sin, but the source of that sin, which is the human heart. Remember the first ever murder between brothers, Cain and Abel, in Genesis 4. God confronted Cain on his murderous mentality long before he ever took Abel into the field to kill him. It's not enough that we don't actually murder those that we hate. We are commanded not to hate in the first place. Or even insult one another. Jesus says that even if you call someone worthless, which essentially means, is what raka means in this passage. If you call somebody worthless, that is tantamount to murder. When I was in the 5th and 6th grade, I was bullied mercilessly. My classmates had a name for me, and like Raka, it also started with an R. I won't say the word because it's not technically a cuss word, but it's highly offensive, and still highly offensive to me. This nickname implied that I was worthless, that I was a waste of space and a waste of the air that I breathed. That is how I felt my classmates thought of me. I was a pariah. I was made to feel inferior and devoid of any value. No wonder I still struggle with self-esteem and confidence issues. I had a friend growing up who once said that I have a self-esteem of a ham sandwich. Well, it has been a long journey that God has brought me on to heal the wounds inflicted on me over 20 years ago, 2 decades ago. And sometimes I still feel the sting of those wounds at time. Whenever I experience a failure, or I mess up, or I suffer a loss of some kind and I blame myself, I'm tempted to say to myself, well, I'm just a raka. When we fall into conflict with our fellow humans, our friends, family members, neighbors, or even fellow church members, we are commanded to work through that conflict to the end goal of reconciliation and restoration. Maybe you still feel the sting of a falling out that you had with a friend or a family member who cut you off. Or maybe you did the cutting off. And there are certainly times to cut someone off, especially when matters of abuse are present. But maybe you still feel that sting. Maybe you look back on the dissolved relationship, and you realize just how trivial that conflict was. But so much baggage has been built up since then that forgiveness and reconciliation and restoration seem impossible. Well, it's a good thing that Jesus is a carpenter and he can build bridges. And when we go to God and we seek reconciliation with our neighbors, nothing is impossible. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but it can happen. I can remember having a falling out with a dear friend of mine because he deemed that I was not Christian enough or worthy enough to be a part of his life. And of course, we both brought our own sins to the table that contributed to our falling out. But I always felt like I was the patsy, that he kind of put all the blame on me so he could save face. Well, one day, a few years after our falling out, um, his wife and son, they came to return some things at the store that I worked at. I also worked the return desk, and they were being helped out by one of my coworkers who was at the POS or the register next to me. And his little boy, he looked up at me and with his big doe eyes, and he said, "My daddy says he hates you." Mm. I mean, talk about a punch to the gut. This is a friend that I dearly love, still dearly love, and who I consider closer to me than a brother. And while I doubt my friend actually said those words exactly, kids can be pretty perceptive. And they pick up a lot of the vibes that we put down. Well, Jesus tells us in verses 24 and 26 about two scenarios in reconciling differences to one another. The first is if you are in church worshiping God and you remember that someone has something against you, leave the church immediately and go reconcile, then come back and worship. God is not interested in communion with us when we are out of communion with someone he loves. If you are a parent of siblings, adult siblings who have quarreled and cut each other off, you may understand the pain that God feels when two of his children are at odds. The second scenario is if you're on your way to court with someone over some offense, do everything you can to settle outside of court and make peace with your brother or sister. And this can be read in both in a literal way. Jesus doesn't want us suing each other over every little offense. There are some who call themselves Christians who are very sue happy. I heard a story about a man who ran a popular ministry in town, and however he was exposed as a fraud and an embezzler, but he tried to join a local service club a little later, and his reputation followed him, and he was refused membership at this club, and he still claiming the name of Christ, he threatened to sue them. Well, maybe you can think of Christians or even celebrity Christians who are sue happy. This is wrong and ungodly. Give me 1 second. My microphone's about to cut out any second, so I'm just going to reset it really quickly. I thought it would be a lot quicker if I just turned it off and back on real quick, but when I tried to turn it back on, I guess it had some connectivity issues, and well, isn't technology amazing? Anyway, and another angle in verses 25 and 26 can be considered in a different way. We are all on our way to court, in a sense. The highest court in the universe, actually. We're all heading to judgment, and Jesus is clear that he wants us to forgive one another. And in fact, Jesus is the judge who will be doing the judging in this trial. Jesus expects us to work out our issues with one another and seek reconciliation on this side of eternity. In the same sermon, in the next chapter, and we'll read this more in depth in the coming weeks, Jesus says in chapter 6, verse 14, "For if you forgive men their trespasses, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses." God is serious about reconciliation. He is serious about forgiveness, and not just superficial forgiveness where you say the words, "I forgive you," but then you have nothing to do with that person at all. You just completely cut them out of your life. Essentially, kind of murdering them in your own sphere of relationships, right? You're casting them out, exiling them, cutting them off, and making them feel inferior or not worthy enough for your friendship or your relationship. God wants us to be reconciled. We were designed and created to be not only in perfect relationship with God, but also to be in good relationship and relationship with each other and creation itself. That's that shalom, that's that peace, that wholeness that is so present throughout the Bible, that was shattered in Genesis 3 when sin entered the world. Well, I want to challenge you, if there is anyone that you need to reconcile with, do so immediately. Do it today. In fact, make it the very next thing you do if you're able to. Give them a call, shoot them a text, invite them out to lunch or coffee, and work it out and work through it. Seek reconciliation and restoration, and in doing so, you are imitating Jesus, who seeks reconciliation and restoration with us as well. Well, I hope that you have been blessed and edified in this devotion. I pray that you have a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to see you on Sunday. If you've never visited Capital City Baptist Church and you're in the Elk Grove, Sacramento area, we would love to host you. We would love to get to know you and meet you. And so please swing on by. At the very least, you can always check out our worship services online, but it's just not quite the same as worshiping with God's people in person and in that very present community that we enjoy. Well, have a wonderful week, and God bless.